Hello, music fans. Welcome to Bands and Beers with Brennen. I'm your host, Brennen, and the band we're talking about today is Yes. And my beer today is Juicy Ass IPA by Flying Monkey. And at this point, it's pretty clear that I'm just grabbing beers with the most ridiculous name. Today, my guest is Alon. We previously talked about Gentle Giant and Porcupine Tree, and I'm really happy to chat with Alon again today about Yes. How are you doing, Alon?
Hey, Brennan, it's good to be back. My beer today is an herbal tea because I'm recovering from a cold. This is Fruits of the Forest, I believe, with a bit of honey mixed in.
That
It's very
sounds
tasty.
delicious.
I'm excited to talk about Yes with you.
All right. So before we jumped in, we talked about maybe just doing a little blurb on what makes Yes special to us. You want to start with that?
Sure, let's do that. Well, one thing that makes it special to us is we actually, both of us got to see Yes back in, I think 2015, was it? Can you remember when that show was?
Yeah, it was a good show.
It was a really good show, surprisingly good, because I wasn't expecting much because they were all very old at this point. But and also it wasn't the original singer. It wasn't John Anderson. It was
Right.
John Davidson, I think. Um,
Davidson. Yeah, is that his name? Very similar name.
yeah, very similar name and very similar voice.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
true.
it's interesting that whenever they've had albums with not with John Anderson, they've managed to find singers that sound a lot like John Anderson.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but it was a wonderful show. It really channeled that classic Yes energy, and it got me really reinvigorated about the band. I went home and I re-listened to all their music. I'm really glad we got to see them before Chris Squire died as well, because I think he passed away just a year or two after that. So terrific show. But as far as the band itself, I think they're just like a lot of those classic era prog bands. They're very technical, lots of complex songs. But the things that really stand out about this band in particular for me, there's three things. I guess there's the guitar sound,
Yeah.
there's the bass, and the singer. Their guitarist, Steve Howe, he's got a very unique guitar style. He almost never plays chords. Uh, I don't even if you know if you.
He does sometimes for sure. But yeah, he does these leads that are like wacky. Like they don't sound like the way anybody else plays leads. And I think sometimes they almost sound like they could be like sloppy-ish, but it's in like this beautiful way.
They're definitely, yeah. Sometimes he does kind of border on the sloppy. He just kind of packs every free space in the song with these like little fast noodly leads.
Mm,
He's definitely like a more is more kind of guitarist. He's just like plays all over the song, just noodling all over everything. And it's one of those things that it sounds like it would be annoying to play with a guitarist like that, but somehow in the context of this band, it works really well. It just adds to the music.
mm.
The bass as well. He's got a very distinct tone, and I think he feeds his bass signal into both a bass amp and a guitar amp. So
Oh,
he kind
really?
of gets this like very distorted kind of growly tone, and he plays riffs all the time. I get the feeling that Chris Squire is the kind of bassist that really wanted to be a guitarist, but there was already a guitarist in the band because he plays these very guitar-like riffs, and yeah, it gives them a very distinct sound. And the last thing is their singer, John Anderson. He has a very distinct voice. He's got a very kind of high angelic voice.
Yeah.
But it's not like a high metal voice, it's not like a
Yeah.
powerful kind of like Bruce Dickinson, a Ronnie James Dio kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's just this very like gentle kind of like magical elf voice. um
That's a great description.
and it's interesting because those other guys like Bruce Dickinson, Ronnie James Dio, when you hear them speaking in interviews, they just have a regular kind of male baritone voice. But
Yeah.
when you hear John Anderson speaking, he's got a very high pitched voice. Like he's not putting on this voice, he's not going into his falsetto range, he's just
Right.
singing in his natural voice.
Yeah.
um
That's interesting.
yeah, it's really unique. And lyrically he sings about all these kind of like fantasy new age themes. He's really into a lot of new age philosophy, and their lyrics can be a little bit opaque sometimes. It's really hard to understand what they're singing about.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things where it, you know, it's more of a vibe than actually understanding what individual lyrics are about.
Yeah.
Um, it's just kind of this new age positive vibe to a lot of their lyrics.
Cool.
I think for me, those are the three things that make Yes a really unique band. What about you, Brennan?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's a really good summary. Yeah, I agree. I've heard John Anderson speak, and he has a high pitched voice even in speaking. And yeah, he's unique in that it's this high voice, but he's not going for that powerful kind of metal Dio, Rob Halford or Bruce Dickinson. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It's kind of the elf voice. And yeah, I think a lot of their lyrics are like fantasy based, but it seemed like as they went on, I think some of their newer stuff feels a bit more kind of like Jesus-y almost. I don't know if that's something we'll touch on, but I kind of got that vibe that it might have been more kind of spiritual um, in there, especially as it went on towards their newer stuff. I don't know if they've always kind of been spiritual. Maybe it's kind of the fantasy stuff has been more metaphorical, but it's becoming more clear now. But for what makes Yes special for me, I think like if I was gonna define prog rock to somebody, like I think the Yes albums in the early 70s would be like the defining sound for me. If I had to tell somebody this is what progressive rock is, it's kind of like the yeah, it's the benchmark, something like Close to the Edge or stuff like that. So that's part of what makes them special. And then yeah, the crazy noodly guitar work I think is really fun. All right.
Yeah, I see what you mean about the spiritual stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think they ever name drop Jesus specifically, but they
Mhm.
do sing a lot about God and stuff. And I
Right.
think that
And heaven and yeah.
yeah, I think John Anderson, he's really into like Eastern religion and philosophy and New Age stuff. Um, I'm not sure if Christianity is their thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, if it is, they never really explicitly name drop it because they don't want to alienate their audience.
Right. Yeah. They don't they don't want to sound like a Christian band. And yeah, maybe it's not Christian at all. There's some references of like God and heaven and spiritual stuff like that makes me think it could be. And there might be different religions even within the band. And I
Hmm.
don't know if I actually didn't look into it too much if they all write lyrics, but I think there's multiple lyricists in the band too. So maybe there's just one member of the band that's a particular faith and another member that's another faith, and they write kind of spiritual like stuff. All right, and then we were going to rapid fire our bottom five for each of us, and then the next five for each of us. Since Yes has so many albums, we didn't want to do our typical back and forth one album each format. So we're going to kind of start at the bottom, but we'll start with Alon's bottom five. Want to list those off?
Sure. Sure. So no big surprise here. Most of my bottom five are going to be from their later albums because
Right.
this is a band that's been playing for what 50 years now, and even though they've got some great songs, great albums out, it's hard to maintain that level of quality for that long. And at this point, they're definitely not really in their prime anymore. I think my bottom album is Heaven and Earth, which came out in 2014. It still kind of has hints of that prog sound, but
Yeah.
I find that a majority of the album is just kind of boring adult pop ballads, and they're kind of like cheesy, inspirational music for old people.
Yeah.
um, so I wasn't really feeling that one a lot. Number 21 for me is their last album, Quest, which came out in 2021.
Mhm.
I also found it pretty cheesy. Um, it's like has a very fantasy vibe, like you're going on a journey, and it's kind of like it's almost like power metal, but
Yeah.
without the metal,
Sound.
right? And And
I
one
can
thing,
hear the lyrics being like power metal. Oh, do you have favorite tracks from each of these? If you want to list like just one favorite song, or if there were any standouts.
you know what, I didn't even really know favorite tracks for some of these bottom ones, but if there
Okay,
are any standouts, I will point them out.
cool.
um I think the thing that really jumped out at me about this last album is that they use they slather on this really grotesque kind of auto tune on the vocals.
Oh,
um
I hate that.
and yeah, like for me, that's just not what the Yes sound is about, right? Like I love their 70s albums partially because they're kind of sloppy, they're kind of rough. It sounds like a real band playing in a room and not like this studio product.
Right.
And yeah, the latest album doesn't really channel that for me. Number 20 for me is Open Your Eyes from 1997.
Mhm.
um, it's one of those albums that even though it came out in the 90s, it sounds very 80s. It feels like that sort of happened to a lot of these kind of dinosaur bands, that they were like about a decade behind the sound of the day. um, it's got these huge 80s drums. um, but there's, just like all their albums, there's some good sections there that stand out. Like
Yeah.
I thought The Solution had some really nice instrumental parts.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, that was the favorite that I highlighted on that one as well.
Oh,
They
nice.
were like
I think we're both looking for the same things in these later albums, just like some hint of early
hoping for
Yes.
yeah, hoping for the hints of their former glory.
Number 19 for me is Keister Ascension 2. Um, this was a double album, and it was kind of, it's a weird album because it's not a fully live album and it's not a fully studio album.
Yeah,
So some of it is a live album where it's classic Yes tracks that performed live,
yeah,
and those are really nice. But there's also a handful of new songs thrown into both Keister Ascension and Keister Ascension 2.
yeah,
And I think especially when you put them side by side, like classic Yes and washed up 90s Yes, you can really see the difference in quality between the songs.
yeah,
um the lyrics are like just kind of like a lot of meaningless new age stuff that, I don't know, it doesn't, like, there's this one song where he just keeps chanting over and over again, cover me up and bring me to the power. um
oh yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what that means. It doesn't really do anything for me, like on an
Jesus.
emotional level. Jesus, who knows, maybe. But number 18 is the first Keister Ascension, which came out a year earlier, 1996. Again, two new tracks that cheesy lyrics, just like lots of vague stuff about love. But somehow in the 70s they were also doing lots of cheesy spiritual lyrics, but it worked a lot better. And
Yeah,
here I just kind of cringed. Like there was one lyric, give in to love so we can become masters of our dimension.
yeah. It sounds like really hippie, like yeah, new age meditation, like really like positive, almost like they're doing what do you call it, like motivational like coach type stuff in song. Like some of the new stuff really gave me that vibe as well.
Definitely, yeah, like the kind of tape that you listen to while you sleep so that you can have like positive affirmations when you wake up.
Exactly.
So I think I went through my bottom five. What about you, Brennan? What are
All right,
your
yeah,
bottoms?
we have some overlap here, but my bottom one was one, I don't think you mentioned this one, but I'm gonna go with Talk from 1994, their 14th album. It's kind of like just a pop rock vibe on it, and there are still some okay songs on here. I think my favorite song on it would be Endless Dream, which is, oh wait, Endless Dream has two parts. So specifically the part called Talk, which I guess is the title track of the album. It's the proggiest song on the album. It's like 11 minutes and 54 seconds. It's got really cool angelic vocal harmonies on it. But yeah, I like that one. The rest kind of sounds like pop rock with some, they have like country-ish hints on that album and stuff like that. So it's not exactly what I go to Yes for.
I
Uh,
actually also noted Endless Dream as my favorite song off of Talk.
oh, nice.
Yeah, I like, there's one part, there's like an instrumental section where there's like a wah guitar and it kind of pans from left to right. And it kind of reminded me a bit of, what they did on like Yours Is No Disgrace. So to me, that was a standout part of the album.
Cool. Yeah, and then my next two, I'm gonna go with Keys to Ascension 1 and 2. As my number 21 and 20. And yeah, like you said, these are both like half live, half studio. And yeah, the live stuff's great, but I tried to like ignore that for the ranking because I don't like to compare like live albums to studio albums because they're not really comparable. They're almost like different things. So it's apples to oranges. So I'm kind of just thinking about the studio tracks here. And they are okay. I guess I should have started off by saying I don't really hate any Yes albums. I don't really like Talk, but I wouldn't say I hate it. They're all like passable. They're good musicians and they're well recorded songs, well written, but they just don't have the magic that they used to have. Um, so that's why these ones are at the bottom. So even my lower ranked ones, like I'd still listen to them and they're okay. But my favorite song on Keys to Ascension 1 out of the originals would Be the One. And then on Key to Ascension 2, my favorite original there would be Mind Drive, which is actually a long epic. It reminds me of And You and I and Close to the Edge and kind of some of their classic stuff. It actually does sound a little bit more like the 70s. They've got cool rhythms and they do more time signature stuff, like odd time stuff that they used to do. They don't do the odd time stuff as much on the new stuff, but I think there was some stuff in 7 on that song and some cool stuff in there. So I like that. And then my next two, well, after Keys to Ascension, I'm going to go with Union from 1991. It's interesting because what they did with this one, it's their 13th album and they actually amalgamated two versions of the band. So they basically got like all the previous and current members of Yes together and they were like, let's make an
Oh,
album with like all of us. So that's why it's called Union.
oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's a bit more on the pop rock side though, but it's still got some like hints of prog. My favorite song there would be Miracle of Life, which has some really awesome rhythms on the keyboards, great fast guitar riffs, and I think there was some cool odd time stuff there. I was counting one part in like 17, so very unusual stuff there. But some of the other songs are just like simple solo acoustic guitar songs and stuff like that, and not it's kind of like hit or miss on Union, where there's like a few great songs, but then a lot of like just kind of boring kind of stuff. And the last of my bottom 5 is going to be Open Your Eyes from 1997, which is their 17th album. Again, it's kind of pop rock sounds, has a couple progressive songs. They almost, it seems like that was their formula starting in the 90s, where they would make a pop rock album and then they'll put one or two prog songs on it so they can satisfy their prog fans and still be a prog band. So my favorite song here is The Solution, which also has that progginess, time signature changes, has a good guitar solo. Yeah, that's my bottom 5.
Yeah, I feel the same way as you about how a lot of these albums, they're frustrating because they have like one or two good prog songs and then the rest of it is just like adult pop, and it's just like, why couldn't they just write like 10 songs like that one prog song and then they'd have a classic album on their hands?
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's going to be a lot of overlap here as well.
Yeah.
My, I guess, bottom six to 10, wait, no, anyways, the next bottom 5
Yeah.
um are, I'm gonna go a bit out of order here. um my number 17 is Tales from Topographic Oceans,
Oh,
which
okay.
is from their classic era. um but I just feel like it's one of those albums where up to this point in their career they had been getting more and more complex, more and more progressive and conceptual, longer songs. And I feel like on this one they just went too far.
Yeah,
Like
I could hear that.
everything everything is like kind of overblown. And I think before this they released Close to the Edge, which is a it's a pretty challenging song. It's like
Yeah.
20 minutes. It starts out with lots of noise, and it was a very well received album. And I think they thought, okay, if this one did well, then we can go even
Do
further
that.
in this direction.
Yeah.
So Close to the Edge had one super long song, and then a bunch of shorter songs on the B-side. Here, it's a double album with 4 22-minute songs.
Yeah.
And the songs, they just go on and on. They're kind of feel very jammy, so it's like riff after riff. And the sections go on for really long times, and they have really pretentious names like The Revealing Science of God, in brackets, Dance of the Dawn. Like it almost seems like a parody of progressive rock. It seems
Yeah.
like for people that hate prog, this is what all prog sounds like. um yeah, the songs kind of feel underwritten. Like, even though Close to the Edge was really long, it still had verses and it had hooks, it had a chorus you can sing along to. Here you don't really get any verses, just these long repetitive sections.
Mhm.
There's Yeah, Revealing Signs of God, it just kind of hangs out on this one major chord and the band noodles over it. I think one of my least favorites is The Remembering. It starts off with this really kind of plodding melody that just goes between 2 chords, and it goes on for about 3 minutes. And then finally, after 3 minutes, it changes, and it just feels like the biggest change in the world because you've been listening to the same 2 chords for the last 3 minutes. And then it goes back to those 2 chords, and it's just the most infuriating thing in the world. It's almost like they're taunting
Finally
you.
escaped this.
It's like the song that never ends, it's like it's taunting you. And yeah, it just felt like a chore to listen to even a single time. And I can't imagine what it must have been like to go on tour with this material and have to play this song night after night. Yeah, yeah,
Some people really like it. I actually have it a bit higher up, not like super high up, but you'll see, I guess. But I agree that they went like way off the deep end in terms of making the songs too long.
Yeah, I know there's different opinions on it, but for me, there's a few sections in it that I'm like, okay, like I can groove to.
Yeah.
But overall, it's just it doesn't do anything for me. My number 16 is Union from 1991.
Yeah.
Same things that you said about it, that a lot of it is just kind of just inspirational adult pop. And some of the songs are really frustrating because they come in with these really cool prog intros. And you think it's going to be like a terrific song, and you add it to your favorites playlist, and then it goes into the verse, and as soon as the singing starts, you're like, oh, this is what the song is actually like, and it just goes into like a boring
standard verse chorus.
Yeah, just like a really boring kind of adult pop song. And then it's pretty misleading. My number 15 is Talk. I liked Real Life off of this one. It has like a really heavy riff, which is not something you'd expect to hear from Yes, especially in 1994.
Was it called Real Life or Real Love? I wrote that down as my second favorite.
Oh, maybe it's Real Love, sorry.
Maybe I wrote it down wrong. Let me see. I'll check Wikipedia. I think it's Real Love.
Yeah, but I think this is a song that probably for both of us we heard for the first time while listening to the discography for this. So it's kind of cool that we're doing this, because I think before this we probably just focused on like the classic era stuff.
Mostly.
And yeah, like this gives us a chance to
heard it all once, but then I would only ever like go back and listen to the ones that are my favorite. But like I did even before we re-listened, I had listened to it all once. But so some of the newer ones I've only listened to like twice in my life, whereas the older one, like the classic period, I've listened to time and time again.
Okay, that's cool, because for me, a lot of these songs I'm hearing for the first time, and there was a few that are like kind of pleasant surprises. That there was a few songs from albums that I'd never listened to before that I got added to my Master Yes playlist. which is pretty cool. But yeah, Talk, like you said, Endless Dream has some really cool parts. Um, the cover of this album is butt ugly. I
Oh,
have no idea what they went for here. It looks like it was drawn by a kindergartner in MS Paint. They actually apparently hired an artist to make this, which it's mind blowing, especially for Yes, because they're known for having these beautiful, lush, fantasy inspired covers. All
right.
their classic albums they have hand painted covers by this artist Roger Dean,
Mhm.
and they're just like these beautiful like
Yeah, when did you
sci-fi.
work with him again?
Yeah, I have no idea. Like, imagine if you're Roger Dean and you've painted all these covers, and then it's 1994, and they're like, "No, we're not gonna go with you this time. We're just gonna like get this like scraggly MS Paint
5-year-old.
logo." Yeah, this 5-year-old has really got something good going on.
Yeah. Like, I'm a
Um,
terrible artist, but it looks like something I would make if I was trying to make it's even worse than something I would make in paint if I was trying to make a crappy album cover for like my high school band or something.
yeah, it looks like one of those memes, like graphic design is my passion, you know. um that's my number 15 is Talk. Number 14 is Fly From Here from 2011. I actually really like the title track of this one. It's a big multi-part epic.
Mhm.
It's got more of a modern prog sound, and it's kind of cool that there's like a bit of, you can hear some cross-pollination going on between different prog bands at the time. I can hear influences from, like Spock's Beard, for example,
Yeah.
in here, which is really cool because Spock's Beard was hugely influenced by Yes. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
a back and forth thing
Completing the
happening.
cycle. Yeah, completing the cycle.
Yeah,
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 I like that a lot too.
um that number 13 is Tornado. I have no idea how to pronounce this. I guess it's a mix of
Tornado or Tormato, depending
Tormato,
on where you're from. Like,
Tornado, Tormato.
is it a play on tornado and tomato?
Yeah,
Okay.
the cover literally has a tomato splattered on it, which
Yeah, and
is,
is there a tornado on it too? Maybe in the
it's
background?
hard to see what's in the background.
Wind. Yeah.
It's kind of a bad omen when you're literally throwing rotten tomatoes at your own album cover. Um, yeah, I feel like this is from their classic era. It's from 87. Oh wait, no, sorry, 77.
There's
Um,
okay.
or is it 78?
Maybe 78. Yeah, I have wiki up and it says 78.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
78.
one at 77.
Um, it just doesn't have as many memorable songs. It has "Don't Kill the Whale," which is like kind of like this environmental themed disco song. And in the middle of it, it has this really cool synth solo, which is like whoa, 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 da, 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 da. That part was really neat. Um, but again, it feels like the lyrics are kind of unfocused. Like the title of the song and the chorus is "Don't Kill the Whale," um, but the rest of the lyrics are just kind of vague new age nonsense. So it doesn't really drive that environmental message home.
Yeah.
Um, there's there's a few really cheesy ones on here, like Circus of Heaven, um, which is just like really cloyingly super happy. Um, Arriving UFO is also pretty cheesy. It has lots of like corny alien noises. I really liked, I think my favorite on here is On the Silent Wings of Freedom. Um, it has kind of like a slow, epic build up, and it gets like faster and faster, and it's this big triumphant rock song.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, this album had like a cheesy sound and it also like seemed really happy sounding. And that particular song there, On the Silent Wings of Freedom, I remember had like some reggae vibes and it was kind of weird and cheesy, like this whole thing. I don't know what it was, but it was kind of fun at the same time. So I think I have it a
yeah.
little higher in my ranking than you do, but there's definitely something weird about it.
I did notice the reggae vibes a little as well. And it's interesting that when we were talking about Gentle Giant, they started introducing reggae like right around this time
Mhm.
in 78. And I
That
guess
made me think.
it was really big in that time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and there's a song called Money, which I guess is trying to kind of have a similar message to like the Pink Floyd Money, but it's, lyrically it's not nearly there.
I wonder
It
if the police became really big around that time, because like I think it felt like Rush did a lot of the reggae around then too, and Gentle
mhm,
Giant, and Yes, and I think they were all influenced by the police, and their first album came out in '78 as well, right?
mm,
I think Outlandos d'Amour, and they had this like new wave post-punk reggae rock kind of sound,
right.
but they were
It
still kind of like unlike the rest of like the punk scene that was kind of more simplistic. I think the police were still kind of musicians, and they had cool drums and stuff like that in their music and cool guitar parts. So maybe these bands were like, well, if we gotta bring in any punk influence, let's listen to this band and pull out the reggae. I don't know, just a theory.
No, I think it's definitely, you're onto something. The police were huge, and they probably had a big influence on this. Also, Bob Marley was big around this time.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's cool to hear those outside influences coming in. I think that was my number 13. I guess how many did I go through? One,
You
two,
just
three, four, five. Yeah, I think those are my next ones.
cool.
Um,
Yeah, and for the top 12, we'll go back to our usual worst worst to best format where we'll alternate one and one. But I think this rapid fire worked, helped us get through the bottom 10 a lot more quickly. But I guess I need to
yes.
do my uh, bottom 6 to 10. I think we have some overlap again here, but also some differences. So that's always good. My number, I think I'm at 17 is where we start this. Yeah. 17th favorite would be Heaven and Earth, their 21st album, which I think is their first album with John Davidson on lead vocals. And it doesn't really feel as progressive as most of their work to me. It feels kind of like more of a singer-songwriter album with like some songs where they just add synth and guitar leads after and like add the yes harmonies. But I could like imagine just like one person just writing all these songs on acoustic guitar, and then they're like, let's yesify them afterwards. So that's kind of what it sounds like to me. They're not doing the time signature changes, genre bending, and no long epics or anything like that. The last two songs on the album become a little bit more progressive, so those are actually my favorites. My favorite song on this would be Subway Walls, which has a cool 7-beat section, awesome keyboard and guitar solos. And then my number 16 favorite Yes album would be actually their first album, Yes from 1969. This was before they even got Steve Howe on guitar. So it, I think it's a good album. It's just before they really found themselves. My favorite song there would be Survival, which again, I think for these kind of simpler, poppier albums, I kind of just picked the most proggy song on the album as my favorite, which I think this is. It's got a cool opening riff, nice clean guitars that remind me of Pink Floyd. They have some nice jazzy part, good vocals. And then my number 15 is The Ladder. It's their 18th album from 1999. I don't have too much to say about this one, but it's just kind of there. My favorite song on there is Lightning Strikes. It's actually got a really dancey drum beat and a bit of a reggae vibe too that we were talking about. But it's kind of like dancey reggae, but also prog because it's got like 7 beats sections. And it's also got that really like happy, catchy, and kind of cheesy sound to it that a lot of Yes songs have, but it's kind of fun at the same time. So I don't mind it. And my number 14 is going to be Magnification from 2001, which is their 19th album. And this is more of like a symphonic rock album. And they did this without a keyboardist. And instead, they got the San Diego Symphony Orchestra on it, which is kind of cool. But I actually prefer their stuff with keyboards because I think the keyboard is like a pretty important instrument for Yes. Um, yeah, my favorite song there would be Dreamtime, which has some nice symphonic stuff, a pretty cool outro. So I still like it, but I feel like I'm missing the keyboards there. And then my number 13 is going to be their newest one, actually, the one from this year. And maybe I'm putting it high just because it's new and it's got the novelty factor. Maybe it'll actually end up being lower for me. But yeah, this is their 22nd album. They're really old at this point. But I like it. It's new and it's fresh for me. So that's kind of cool. I like the opening track the best, the Icebridge. It's also the first single they released. I guess the problem with this is that the opening track is the best, and then it kind of just like goes downhill afterwards. So when you hear the opening track, you're like, oh, maybe this will be good, kind of like return to form, but it doesn't quite get there. It doesn't, they can't quite just reach the heights of their classic period anymore. So it's unfortunate, but it's still decent, and I can listen to it and respect the album.
It's interesting that some of the songs that you liked are off of these albums are going to be very different than my picks.
Yeah, well, yeah, for some we had like the exact same, but then for others we have completely different ones.
Yeah, I guess we're going to get to the cream of the crop now.
All right, yeah, we'll jump in with your number 12.
Sure. My number 12 is The Ladder.
Okay.
I know you really liked Lightning Strikes off of there, but I really, really did not feel that song at all. Something about the combination of the 7/4 beat and like the dance, the dance beat, and just like the super happy ukulele and the inspiration lyrics.
Yeah,
It just
weird. I'll give you that.
it just rubbed me the wrong way. Like, it's cool that they're experimenting, that they're like, hey, what if we take like a techno beat and do it in 7/4? But that one, to me, not my favorite Yes song. I really, really liked Homeworld off of this album. I think it's like, for me, that one is like a classic Yes type of song. And I was also kind of disappointed, same as what you said before about how it's like the first song on the album, so you start listening to it and you're like, oh my god, maybe the whole album is going to be like this. But then it doesn't ever really reach that same height. It just kind of peters out. But yeah, Homeworld is on my classic Yes playlist.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
To me though, I noted that Homeworld kind of does sound like one of those typical sounding Yes epics, but it kind of felt a bit like phoned in, like Yes by numbers almost, or that they're almost trying to replicate what they did in the past, but they don't really like feel it anymore. It's like copycat.
But that chorus is so catchy though. Just what keeps us alive, just what makes us realize. I don't know. It's infectious.
They always have good catchy vocals and like cool synths and cool guitars. So at least even like stuff that feels like kind of subpar Yes, at least always has that to fall back on. So I never like hate what I'm hearing. That's good.
What's your number 12?
My number 12 is going to be Tornado. You mentioned it already, their ninth album. So I think this is the weakest of their 70s albums for me. But my favorite song, I think you mentioned this song as well. I don't remember if you said it was your favorite, but is Don't Kill the Whale. I think it's got cool guitar riffs, nice synth parts, good vocal parts. Yeah, so I don't hate the album. I actually kind of like it. From my top 12 from here on is like where I start really being able to enjoy these. It just isn't as good as their other stuff from the 70s or even the 80s. I noticed we haven't mentioned a lot of the 80s albums yet, so I guess we like the 70s and 80s stuff.
That was their prime, I think. And yeah, I agree with you. Don't Kill the Whale is probably my favorite on there. Actually, it's a tie between that one and Silent Wings of Freedom.
Oh yeah, you said Silent Wings of Freedom. Yeah, for me, another one I like on there is Arriving UFO. I think you said that sounded kind of cheesy, but yeah, it sounds really happy. I think that's one of the things I call out a lot is this. That's one of the things that Yes is a little bit unique on in the prog world. Or I think maybe modern prog gets more darker than classic prog, but they're like the happiest sounding prog band. uh,
Definitely.
like
Yeah.
King Crimson is so dark and stuff like that, and like even Gentle Giant, they has some really cheerful stuff, but they also have this like darkness from time to time that Yes never really goes there. They're always like, yay, cheerful.
It can get a bit much sometimes.
Yeah,
And it's funny that we're doing this after we were talking about Porcupine Tree, because I find Porcupine Tree is kind of the opposite, because
yeah, it's always
their
sad.
stuff is just like unanimously gloomy,
Yeah.
and sometimes it can be a bit much. So it's
Mhm.
nice to balance out the Porcupine Tree with some cheery Yes songs.
Yeah, I need somebody that's kind of in the middle there. That can I like a band that can do both and that they kind of mix it up.
Hmm. Yeah.
I guess if I had to pick one though, I actually kind of prefer the sadder sound over the happy sound. Something about it's maybe just my bias of liking the sound of minor keys more than the major. I think it's easy to sound cheesy in major keys.
That's true. But I think overall as a band, I prefer Yes to Porcupine Tree.
Oh yeah, that's a close call for me. I might actually slightly prefer Porcupine Tree just on the strength of like their last four albums alone.
Hmm. Yeah.
Hey, how about your number 11?
My number 11 is Drama, which was kind of an interesting album.
Mhm.
It was a transition album for them. It came out in 1980. And their singer and their keyboardist, John Anderson and Rick Wakeman, they quit the band before this album came out. Um, Apparently, they tried making an album together, but they had musical differences,
Mhm.
so they quit. And maybe that's why the album is called Drama.
Yeah, maybe.
um, and very interestingly, they got replaced by the singer and the keyboard player from a band called the Buggles,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is the band that did Video Killed the Radio Star, which is
Right.
like the last two people that you would expect to see in Yes. But I think that they actually do a pretty good job in the
Yeah.
band. They're obviously, big fans of the genre and of Yes in general. Um, and they're not trying to turn Yes into the Buggles or anything.
Yeah.
Uh, the singer, I think Trevor Horn is his name. He
Yeah.
does a really good job of channeling John Anderson. Like his voice sounds very similar.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually remember when I first heard a song from this album, it was off of a best of compilation, and it was the song Tempest Fugit. And I didn't even realize that it was a different singer.
Yeah,
Um,
me neither. I had the same thing. I didn't realize until I read into it that it was a different singer. But then once you read it, you can kind of tell once you hear it. But he does sound like him.
a little bit, yeah. Like once but yeah, he does a great John Anderson impersonation.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I think that song Tempest Fugit is my favorite track off of the album. To me, that's like it has that like classic Yes sound.
Yeah.
It starts off with this really cool bass riff that just kind of like goes up and down a scale, and then it goes into the reggae verses. It's just like this very fast kind of energetic reggae, and it just hits all the right notes. Favorite song on the whole album. um, the rest of the songs are a little bit cheesy sometimes, so I don't you know it's not as strong as the
Yeah.
Tempest Fugit song. What about you? What's your number 11?
My number 11 is Big Generator from 1987, their 12th album. This it's more of a pop rock album, but here, so I don't hate all of their I don't rank all their pop rock low. So it's not just like pop versus prog. I'm okay with the pop sound. I just like it to be interesting. And I think Big Generator, they were able to make it interesting. It was like dancey and poppy, but it was still cool. And it had cool guitar parts. My favorite song on here is the title track, Big Generator, which is this kind of catchy, dancey pop song. But I like it's a cool guitar riff. It almost kind of sounds like a metal guitar. They got some like metal influence in here, which they don't really have. Like a bunch of other prog bands took a little bit of influence from metal, but Yes tried to seemed to stay away from that mostly. But this one has a bit of that, which is kind of cool. I guess there's no Steve Howe on this album, which is unfortunate. But the other, I forget the name of the guitarist. they did have there. He was still pretty good, and I enjoyed it.
I didn't realize that Steve Howe wasn't on this one, but that makes perfect sense now that you mention it, because you don't hear any of those noodly parts that you're so used to with the Yes songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that you put this one higher up. It's because it is difficult to kind of compare a lot of these albums, because some of them are like these big conceptual prog albums, and you're comparing them against like pop albums like Big Generator. It's a real
Yeah,
apples
like
and
something
oranges thing.
you might hear Big Generator and like 90125 like played on a disco floor, and I think maybe they were kind of going for that, which is interesting. And it's very hard to compare that to something that you would expect to kind of like be the type of person who like immerses themselves in these 20-minute epics in their basement with like speakers all around them, versus like something that you see a bunch of people like doing the disco to.
Exactly. Yeah. It's you have to keep an open mind while listening to these. They're not all going to be proggers.
Yeah.
My number 10 is Time in a Word, which is their second album, I believe.
Yeah.
So their first album was very poppy, it was very Beatlesy. And this one is kind of, you can see that they're making a move in the direction of prog.
Yep.
And it's interesting, they got an orchestra for this as well, which is kind of amazing that they could afford that in the 60s for their second album. It kind of reminds me a bit of what the Moody Blues did, because that was like that orchestral prog sound that they were going for. But I feel like the orchestra doesn't add a huge amount in this one. Yeah, and I think also the mix it's kind of not that great. It's kind of like those 60s mix where all the instruments are hard panned to the left and to the right. And if you know, like all the guitars in your right ear, all the drums are in your left ear, and it can get a little bit tiring to listen to if you're listening to it in headphones.
Yeah.
I liked I think my favorite song on here is Then. It kind of has this like brooding mood. The lyrics are kind of cheesy, just like hippie lyrics. Like there's one: love is the only answer, hate is the root of cancer.
Oh my.
You have to like, I think when you listen to Yes, you have to really put aside like your cynical thoughts, like, oh my god, this is so cheesy, because they're like a very non-cynical kind of genuine band. You have to kind of just channel your inner hippie. And yeah, that song Then, there's the second half has this like really fast chugging bass, and I feel like that's kind of a thing that you'll hear a lot more in later Yes. So it's kind of cool to hear a bit of a foreshadowing there.
Cool. That's cool, because that's my number 10 as well, is Time in a Word there.
Oh, nice.
Like an album. My favorite song here though is the title track, Time in a Word. I think it's really catchy, like sing-alongable, you know. There's a time.
So catchy.
Time is now and it's right for me.
It's right for me, and the time is now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that chorus is just one of their catchiest. It's a simple, kind of like a simple love song with a catchy chorus, and I think it's the last song on the album. Yeah, it's nice, and I think I forgot about the working with the symphony, but I guess that makes sense, because it sounds like almost like a movie. Like these would be songs that would be playing in a movie soundtrack. I guess the keyboards back in 1970, I think they always kind of wanted to have this symphonic sound to their music, and maybe the keyboards didn't quite sound as symphonic at that time. But I think shortly thereafter, the keyboards started to really be able to pull off the symphonic sound even without an orchestra, like on their albums like Fragile and Close to the Edge. They have keyboards, but it sounds symphonic to me.
It does, yeah. I think it's still mostly on those classic albums, it's mostly like organ and a bit of synthesizer. But I think they also use Mellotron, which is where you get the symphonic sound from.
Yeah, I think so. All right, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is Magnification, which is the other symphonic album, although it's from a very different part in their career. Um, I think, uh, yeah, the symphony here is it's a nice addition, and it feels like there was a lot more symphonic arrangement happening in this one versus Time in a Word. It feels like they actually arranged these cool, unique parts for the symphony, whereas in Time in a Word, the horns are just kind of playing the guitar riff. Yeah, and the my favorite track on here is the title track, and this is another one of those where I think it's like the quality of classic, yes. Unfortunately, the rest of the album doesn't quite match that same level of quality, but that one song is really great.
All right. Yeah, my number 9 is Relayer from 1974, which is their 7th album. And I think this one, I think you mentioned about Tales from the Topographic Oceans, of that going like off the deep end in Prague. I think Relayer was also like that. Like after Close to the Edge with Tales from Topographic Oceans and Relayer, it was like the deepest kind of sound you could go in Prague. So very progressive. It's got a bit of like jazziness to it, and it starts right off the album with a 22-minute epic, The Gates of Delirium, and that's like all of side 1. Then it has 2 9-minute songs on side 2. So it's kind of like Close to the Edge in structure, and nothing on here is bad. It's all pretty damn good actually, but it's like it's not super accessible. This is like the deep end of Prog is Relayer and Tales from a Topographic Ocean. So like you can't start with this one if you're trying to get somebody who is like not an intense hardcore Prog fan into Yes. Like I would not play these albums for people, but I kind of like it. I've dipped my toes in Prog and then kind of progressed to this point where I could handle the really deep stuff, but I can't rank it among my favorite. I kind of like a balance between accessible and catchy and progressive, and this one just went too far to progressive. But my favorite song would be To Be Over, and really it's honestly I picked that one probably because it's the shortest on the album. Like they went too noodly on the longer ones, and I'm not necessarily a fan of that like ambient noise stuff. And Yes doesn't do too much of it on all their albums, but on Relayer and Tales from a Topographic Ocean, they do a little bit too much of it.
Are you talking about the second half of Gates of Delirium?
I think I don't remember everything about Gates of Delirium, but I do kind of remember that it's really long and longer than it needed to be. Like I feel like it's too long for what they have there. Like they could have probably made it half the length and it would have been even better if they kept like the best parts.
Yeah, it definitely is pretty long, and it has some pretty noisy sections as well.
Mm. All right, how about your number 8?
My number 8 is 90125, which is, I can't remember the exact year. I think it's early 80s.
Yeah, 3. Yeah.
And at this point, I think, so this was after Drama, and John Anderson and Rick Wakeman had returned to the band. But the sound that they were going for is very different from their 70s sound. It kind of sounds like stadium rock, basically. You still have bits of prog wedged in all over the place. But it sounds very produced. It doesn't have that like kind of rough around the edges sound that you get from their classic albums. And yeah, like even they've always been known as a band that does a lot of cool vocal harmony parts. But they've always, in the 70s, it sounded a lot more organic. And when I hear a song like Leave It, it has like all these a cappella parts in the background, but all the voices, like all the dum-dums in the background, they all sound very like just very perfect. Like I know there wasn't any auto tune back then, but it just sounds very heavily produced, like almost like if you were to get a Casio keyboard and put on like a vocal patch that goes dum dum dum, and just play it like that. Um, and it's just a bit too produced for my liking. But there are some really great, memorable songs on here, and probably the song that most people know yes for, even if they don't know who wrote the song, is "Owner of a Lonely Heart," which is from this album.
Yeah.
And I love the song, but I also feel like it's another one of those cases where they had like a cool idea, but the lyrics don't really follow through all the way. So the chorus lyric is "Owner of a lonely heart, much better than the owner of a broken heart."
Yeah.
So it's about the whole, is it better to have loved and lost kind of thing.
Right.
But I feel like the verses don't really elaborate on that theme. They're just kind of just generic motivational platitudes about, prove yourself, you are the move you make, take your chance, win or lose. And I feel like they would have been better if they kind of could focus on one theme for the whole song.
Yeah. Actually, it almost sounds like the verse and the chorus might be like, from what you just said there, I haven't analyzed lyrics, but they might be like presenting conflicting sides on whether it's better to have a lonely heart or a broken heart. Because it sounds like the verses from that line are saying like, go for it, give it a try. Like it's okay if you lose, like you can't win if you don't try. Whereas the chorus is maybe saying, oh, it's better to just stay alone and not get hurt.
Maybe, yeah. I hadn't thought about it that way. It is possible that the choruses are just kind of this gloomy, or like, it's better to stay alone, but the verses are like, yeah, jump in,
Yeah.
prove yourself, but yeah, I think it's a pretty good album overall, and it's got lots of, despite being mostly stadium rock, it's got lots of bits of prog sprinkled in all over. And I really like the beginning of "Make It Easy." It's got like a really kick-ass prog intro, and it's another one of those cases of kind of cross-pollination, I think, because to me this sounds more like the neo prog of the 80s rather than the classic Yes sound. It reminds me of a band like IQ, for example.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool to hear that even at this point they kind of had their finger on the pulse of what was happening in music, and they weren't too proud to take influences from other bands. So cool album.
Yeah, I noticed that one was, I was looking on Wikipedia, I think that's a bonus track as well, but I also noted that that's a really great bonus track, Make It Easy, and I was surprised that it wasn't on like the initial main album. I guess they make like a deluxe edition or something that had it, because I thought it was better than a lot of the album tracks too.
Yeah, it's really hard to even tell what songs were on the original album, because whenever you find any of these albums on Spotify, it's always like the deluxe remastered 2013 edition, and there's like more bonus tracks than there are actual original album songs.
Yeah, I always just take a quick look at Wikipedia when I must, because sometimes I like to hear how the album would have sounded like originally, how it was made, and just like listen to it and then not listen to the bonus tracks after, and then be like, okay, that's what it was when it came out. But then sometimes I like to explore the bonus tracks too, and then I'm wondering with this one in particular, like, why the hell is this a bonus track? And like, they could have probably taken some of the other tracks off the album and replaced them with this.
I agree. They definitely should have put that as a non-bonus track. Yeah, I'm not as disciplined in my listening. Usually I just put the album on and I listen up until the point where I hear a song that I've already heard before. And then I look at my phone and it's like the single version or the radio edit or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't need to hear this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of that too. I try to not listen to that when it gets to that point. I don't like when they do those deluxe editions and they have different versions of the previous songs. If it's bonus tracks, I'm all on board with the deluxe edition. But if it's like a different edit of another track, like just put the best edit on and don't put another one.
Yeah, I don't like that either. And I don't like how sometimes they'll have like another track which is just a snippet of a much longer song.
Oh yeah.
Like on Relayer, there's one of the bonus tracks is the Soon section
Oh,
from
okay. It's a
Gates of
section from
Delirium.
yeah.
It's like just listen to the whole song. Is you
Yeah.
don't have 22 minutes to spare.
It is long. All right. My number 8 is Fly From Here from 2011, which is, so I rank this pretty high, which might be surprising to most people. This is my favorite of like their, after I think this is my favorite of after 1990. Yeah. Fly From Here. And yeah, there's no John Anderson on vocals, but I still really like the vocals on this album. And I really like the Fly From Here suite, like you mentioned. And I think it's kind of nice that they broke it into tracks. Like it would have been, they could have made it all one long epic, but they actually broke it into different tracks. And my favorite part of that would be Fly From Here Part 3, which is Madman at the Screens, which has some awesome riffs and in 5 beats per bar, has some, the cool little guitar fills that you expect from Steve Howe. Great keyboards, great vocals, great harmonies. Yeah, something about this album, it just seemed like out of everything they've done since 1990, if this is kind of my favorite, and it's not necessarily the one that sounds the most like classic Yes. I think you said it right when they actually kind of embraced sounds from more modern prog on here, and I think that's really cool. And maybe that's what makes me like it the most out of all their new stuff, is that they were not, it wasn't a pop album, which a lot of their stuff is, and it also wasn't like a cheap imitation of classic prog. It was like Yes kind of making a modern prog album, so I actually really like it.
It's true. Yeah, it doesn't sound like they're trying to just repeat the past. They're doing their own thing. Yeah, it's got a really cool album cover as well. They're back to the classic Roger Dean covers, which is really cool.
Yep. All right, we're at your number 7.
My number 7 is Big Generator.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, I did not think I'd be putting this one this high up in the list going into this, because when I started listening to Yes, I was all about the 70s stuff. And then, I'm like, oh, the 80s stuff, it's just, it's cheesy pop, it's arena rock. But man, this has some catchy songs on there. Big Generator, Rhythm of Love, so catchy. And Rhythm of Love has this really cool, in the pre-chorus, there's like this Beach Boys influence. There's like these background like it's really neat to hear them bringing them in, but kind of like recontextualizing it into this big 80s pop sound. And just like you said, I can totally imagine these songs being played at like an 80s disco.
Yeah.
The vibe that it gave me was like the San Junipero episode of Black Mirror.
Oh yeah.
Where
exactly
and yeah, they're great. And I think my favorite on here is the song I'm Running, which is probably the most prog song on here. It starts out kind of sounding like the song Tequila. It sounds like
Caribbean sound. That's what I noted in the intro. It kind of sounds like something you'd hear in the Caribbean. Is there like a steel drum or something?
I think so, yeah. I think it's probably just like a keyboard sound that sounds like a steel drum, but yeah, it sounds like a weird prog version of Tequila. And it just gets like faster and more intense throughout the song, and it ends with this really cool instrumental. Again, it kind of reminds me of the prog of that day, like 80s prog, so it reminds me of IQ. Yeah, great song. And I'm glad that I discovered it, because I never even heard this one before doing this listen through. Yeah, because I think
really big hits on here too, like Big Generator, Love Will Find a Way. It just sounds like such a classic like 80s ballad, like big sing-along pop song, and it's really catchy.
Yeah, I think before I was just listening to it with the wrong attitude, right? I was just listening to it as a prog snob. But now if I listen to it like not thinking of like this, expecting a Yes album, if I listen to it as if it was like a Tears for Fears album, I'm like, this is really good. I can totally enjoy this.
Yeah, it is hard to like separate that with Yes and be like, okay, but I do try that as well. I try to go ahead and be like, if it's a pop album, it's fine. Just like,
Mhm.
is it a good pop album? And I think Big Generator pulls that off. Some of their other ones, not so much. Like,
Yeah.
Even if I think of it in like terms of pop, I'm just like, But with this one, it's really good. It's like such one of the better 80s pop albums, I would say.
I'm glad that you agree. I was worried that you were going to scoff at me for rating the 80s albums so high.
Well, I mean, I had it at number 11, so you ranked it a little higher than I would.
Yeah.
I still think like, everything Yes does is good, and like anything in my top 12 is like super stellar.
Mhm.
All right. My number 7 is Going for the One from 1977, which is their 8th album. And I really like the opening track, the title track, Going for the One. Around this time, they seem to kind of know what the title tracks and opening tracks should be. So those are often the ones that I pick as my favorite. They're like the most memorable, catchy ones. And Going for the One is cool. It's got this like slide guitar. Vocals are pretty high pitched, but they're really catchy. They have like this country vibe, but it's not, I wouldn't call it country. It's like this really catchy, high pitch, poppy, fun adventure, but has this country slide guitar going on.
It's a slide guitar that makes it sound country. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, so I really like that album. Not sure what else to say about it. It's just, I think this might, well, one other thing to say, this might be the first album like after their prog phase. Like I'd say kind of like the Yes album from 1971 to Relayer in 1974 is like where they're kind of like prog, and then they have Going for the One, which is still prog, but they kind of after Tales from a Topographic Ocean and Relayer went off the deep end of prog, they brought it back. They're like, okay, let's be catchy again. So I like that. It's still a bit proggy, but it's catchier and more memorable and more concise, like not super ridiculous, long, jammy ambient noise stuff that they had on Relayer and Tales from a Topographic Ocean. So I kind of liked it for that.
They definitely reined it in after Topographic Oceans. But yeah, there's still quite a bit of prog on here. Like Awaken, I think, is the prog high point of
that's
this
the
album.
prog epic on it, and I like that one too. That's probably my second favorite. There's, they do cool time signature stuff too. I think with some 11 beats per bar in there. But I think that's the only really long song on the album. There's another one that's maybe 8 minutes, but nothing. That one's 15 or something. Everything like else is kind of in the like 3 to 6 minute range, and it's catchy and it's to the point, but it's still cool and has cool instrumental stuff going on. All right. How about your number 6?
My number 6 is Relayer. And I know that you kind of lump this into the same category as Tales from Topographic Oceans, but I find that to me it's a bit more restrained than Tales from Topographic Oceans. It's kind of closer to like the Close to the Edge vibe, where it's like one big side long epic.
I think it would be like Close to the Edge too, kind of. It almost looks like they're trying to repeat that formula, but they
Close to the Edge to Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, exactly.
I really like this one. I know that you said that Gates of Delirium, you felt like it's a bit too long.
Yeah.
Maybe I partially agree with it. I kind of like how it's a cool concept. So it's based off of Tolstoy's War and Peace, which is a book that is also very long. So I guess it's kind of fitting that they turn it into this. But yeah, it's interesting because when you first start listening to it, the first half of it is pretty cheery, and it's kind of weird because when you hear a song called Gates of Delirium, you expect like a dark metal song, right? But yeah, it's kind of singing about about war, and then in the second half of it, it goes into like the battle section where it's this long instrumental section, and I think they actually put in samples of war noises. And for me, that part is really cool. It's just like one great riff after another. There's these, big booming war trumpets. And after it comes out of like the really chaotic section, there's like this really like triumphant riff. It's like da 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 da, which for me, I don't know. That's I just absolutely love that riff. It just gets me in just in the right spot, and then it ends with this kind of like melancholy song. I don't know whether to call it a song or a section, but the part called Soon, which is like this kind of calm after the storm, kind of hope for the future after a war kind of song. So I really like that one. I think that's my favorite song off the album is Gates of Delirium. The second half kind of has a bunch of shorter songs. None of them really stood out to me that much. I thought, yeah, like something like Sound Chaser, it felt very kind of spastic, and there's a lot of like really breakneck mood changes, and it didn't feel like it was very planned out. So for me, the highlight is definitely Gates of Delirium.
Okay.
All right, we're on to the best ones now.
Yeah. My number 6, I think I'm at, is 90125 from 1983, their 11th album. And this is like, for me, I guess this is my favorite of the pop. I think this is my favorite of the pop. I haven't said another one yet. Drama, I don't know if you count that as pop. I think it's still a little proggy. But this is where they really nailed their pop rock, and they also have this like new wave sound, and maybe there's a little bit of that reggae and like danceable stuff. You could hear this at a disco. If it wasn't for John Anderson's voice on here, and if I heard this, I would just think it's a completely different band from Yes. Like the only thing that makes it sound like the albums that I'm ranking above it is the fact that it's John Anderson. But it is really cool. But yeah, this one also doesn't have Steve Howe on guitar, so that's probably another reason why it doesn't sound like classic Yes. But my favorite song is actually going to be the title track. I know that, no, it's not a title track. Owner of a Lonely Heart, their big hit. Opening song, their big pop hit, very catchy, very danceable. But it's one of these like songs that you could imagine playing on a dance floor and dancing to, but it's still cool, like musically interesting. It has cool little runs in it. So I really like that.
Are you talking about like the part of the intro where it goes da, 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 like
yeah,
the little
like
orchestral stabs?
Like something, yeah, and this dot, and we're just like da, 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 da. Yeah.
I think that's one of those sounds that it was probably very cool in the 80s, but at this point it's just become it's a very dated sound. Like you never hear orchestral stabs now.
That's true. If you listen to this song and you know it's from the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you about that one. I think Owner of a Lonely Heart is definitely the standout track for me there.
Awesome. All right, we're at the top 5 now.
All right, exciting. So I put this one a lot higher than you did. My number 5 is their very first album.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Yes. And I know it's not prog at all, and it's like, yeah, you can tell that they're absolutely Beatles fanboys because a lot of the song, well, they actually do a Beatles cover on here. Yeah, every little thing. And the rest of the songs, even though they're not Beatles covers.
Isn't there also a song where they like use the Day Tripper riff? I forget. I don't know if it's on this album, but I remember like a song where they just bust out Day Tripper.
They do, yeah. They just kind of throw it in the middle of another song. I think it's on here. Well, actually, I think they put it into
Oh,
their
maybe.
cover of every little thing. So they're covering
Oh,
a
okay.
Beatles
Yeah, maybe.
song and they're throwing a riff in from another Beatles song. So it's like
Okay.
a Beatles salad. Uh,
Yeah, it was very Beatles, this album. I like it, but it's not Yes to me.
it's a different yes. It's very the songs on here are so catchy. Like you hear it once and you're going to be humming them. Um, and I think pretty much all the songs on here are really enjoyable. The only one that was like not quite as good was I think Sweetness, which is just a little bit too hokey for me. Um, but yeah, you said Survival was your favorite. I love that one as well. I think my favorite is Herald Land.
Oh yeah.
It's it's a story song, which is very rare for Yes, because they usually don't have a narrative in their lyrics. But yeah, it's about a guy that goes off to war and he comes back with PTSD, I guess.
Mhm.
It's just it's a pretty dark topic for such a
Yeah.
cheery album.
Yeah.
And it's actual lyrics about something, which is always great. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, great album, and like it's I could listen to it forever. Like songs like Beyond and Before, you hear them once and they're gonna be stuck in your head for the rest of your life.
Nice. Yeah, I think Herald Land might have been my second favorite on there too.
Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a great one.
All
What
right.
about what's your number five?
Yeah, keeping with doing the same thing that you did, I'm putting one here that you ranked a lot lower. Tales from a Topographic Ocean for
Oh
19.
no.
So I agree with what you said about it, that it is like the deep end of Prog, where they're just like every song on here is a 20-minute epic, and it's a double album with uh four songs that range between like 18 minutes to 22 minutes for each. Um, and yeah, I just think there's amazing moments on here, but I do think that the songs could have been a bit shorter without losing much. That's my critique of this album, and I totally agree. But I think when they have the moments that really hit, they hit really well. And I'll actually go with a really pretentious title as my number one, The Revealing Science of God, Dance of the Dawn. It's the opening track. It's very cool, long epic, and I think the vocals are pretty catchy. Like there's the whole "What happened to the song we
That
once
part is
did
great.
so well." There's some really like good stuff in here. Uh, but I see what you're saying, and I could see why someone would rank it low. For me, actually, Relayer is I ranked lower than this, and I feel like it's also the deep end of Prog. It's kind of close to the edge part two, but they went a little crazier with Gates of Delirium and ambient noise and making it longer than it need to. I still feel like Tales from a Topographic Ocean has moments that are catchier than Relayer, but maybe I need to listen to them again for sure, because I still like it all, but I when I was doing my ranking, I decided Tales from a Topographic Ocean ranked higher than Relayer for me.
Hmm. I could see what you're getting at. That part with what happened to this song.
Yeah,
It's super catchy and it's Beatlesy, and it kind of reminds you that this is the same band that just 5 years earlier released this very
right.
amazing poppy record, and they're still capable of producing this kind of music.
Yeah,
And it almost makes it frustrating because it's like, oh, couldn't you just like take that section out of this long jam and make that into a cool like 5 minute song?
yeah,
Um,
maybe. I also like the song Ritual, Nous sommes du Soleil. I think there's some parts where they like sing parts in French and stuff, and it's
yeah,
pretty cool too.
Nous sommes du soleil. Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess it means we are
we
the
are
sun.
we are from the sun or something. I think that's what
I think it means just we are the sun. Or
I think
like,
that would be Nous sommes le soleil. Nous sommes du soleil means I think we are from the sun,
oh, okay,
which
okay.
is interesting. I don't know what it means.
I don't think you have to think about too hard about John Anderson's lyrics. You just listen to his pretty voice and just feel the vibes.
Apparently, they're from the sun, which makes sense because they are really happy. All right, how about your number four?
My number four is Close to the Edge.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Based on your reaction, I'm guessing that's your number one. And
I'm
I
not
know
gonna say yet.
or number two. I know that most people, this and Fragile are their top, and I do think this is it's a great album. It took me a bit longer to get into the title track. I remember when I was first getting into Yes, I was listening to songs off the Yes album. I was listening to songs off Fragile, and those ones for me were like instantly catchy, instantly amazing. When I heard Close to the Edge, it's a bit harder to get into because like it starts off with this like 3 minutes of just like kind of unintelligible guitar shredding.
They could have probably shortened it a bit.
And there's like bird noises in the beginning, and then there's that one part like in the shredding where it just kind of stops and everybody goes ah.
I actually love that though. I love
it's
that
great. It's great. And whenever I listen to the song, I always try to come in at the right part for that but I always miss it. I can never get it because it's just like there's
they have to do it live, which is amazing.
They pull it off live. I don't know how these guys count that section because to me it's just like a wall of guitar noodling and then this all comes out of nowhere.
I can't count it either. I don't know if they're doing that.
Yeah, they've got some excellent counting skills there. But yeah, the song is really cool. It's supposedly about this book, Memoirs of a Yogi, it's a book about written by this yogi about his life. But the lyrics you wouldn't get that from reading the lyrics. There's just like weird lyrics about a seasoned witch to call you from the depths of your disgrace and rearrange your liver to a solid mental grace. It's pretty nonsensical.
I like it though. It's catchy.
It is catchy.
I don't know what it means, but the way those words sound, I'm like, yeah.
I'm all about that seasoned witch. But yeah, I agree with you, and I think that John Anderson even admitted at some point in an interview that like he picks words more for the way that they sound and their sibilance rather than their actual meaning.
Right.
Which you totally get that listening to his lyrics. And yeah, apart from the big amazing title track, I also really love on the second half there's And You and I, which is kind of like it alternates between this like pretty acoustic guitar ballad and these big cinematic kind of keyboards. And then at about 6.5 minutes in, there's this really great bouncy guitar part, the part that's like, take what I say in a different way. And there's lovely harmonies over it. And then it goes back into these big epic strings later. Just a great song all around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think the only one that didn't really do it for me on this is they do a cover of America by Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Maybe and that's a bonus track, though, I think. Yeah,
it's possible. Yeah, but it seems like it's a song that they've really stuck with. Like they've been playing it at live shows since the 70s. And it's kind of baffling why out of all the covers they could do, they would choose this one. Because I feel like the original song kind of has a melancholy, like, he's going on a road trip with his girlfriend. And they're like, it's fun at first, but then they kind of like break up halfway through. And in this version, because they give it like the Yes treatment and they make it all super prog, you barely even really notice the lyrics anymore. It's just kind of I don't know, it kind of throws the meaning of the song out the window. So that one wasn't my favorite.
Yeah, I agree on that one. I still actually I kind of like it though. But also, I only really consider this album the first 3 tracks, like Close to the Edge and You and I and Siberian Kachru. And like, that's what the album, so, I was talking about like listening to how it was intended to be originally. It was just those 3 and then done. And when I think of it that way, it's like, oh, that's amazing. But yeah, the America and all there's some like random bonus tracks added in after that.
There's Total Mass Retain, which is just a 3-minute chunk of Close to the Edge.
Yeah, it's just like a sync. I think because they wanted to have a piece of Close to the Edge that they could like play on the radio, so they made this single where they like ripped out this like catchy single part of it. And then I think there's this And You and I, an alternate version, and a studio run through of Siberian Kachru. Like this, I kind of just stop after the first 3 tracks. So I'm like, okay, right there, that's the perfect album.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, it makes sense that they would take out that chunk for the radio, but as an album listener, I can't think of a situation where you're like, I want to hear some Close to the Edge, but I only have 3 minutes to go.
Yeah, it's just to get on radio, honestly. Like in this year, in the year 1972, no radio will ever play an 18-minute song.
Mhm.
So they were like, well, we want to be on radio. Radio is a big part about being popular, I guess. So that's probably what that's all about.
I think that's still true in 2021. There's not many radio stations that are going to play Close to the Edge in its
Yeah,
entirety.
that is true. But also, radio's relevance has gone way down now in 2021. It's all about like Spotify and streaming and being on like the big playlists and stuff like that. So
Definitely.
yeah, and I think like prog bands are okay with being more niche now than they were then. Like prog bands then were still trying to be really popular, whereas
Mhm.
now prog bands are like, we're prog. Like people that like prog will like us, but we don't care if anyone else likes us.
Yeah, in the 70s, it wasn't mutually exclusive. It was
Yeah,
like
they were.
there was the word prog didn't even exist. That was just the rock music of the day.
Mhm. Yeah, and these bands were popular. Like they were in the, all their albums were like hitting top 10 at that time. Like I'm looking at Close to the Edge in the UK hit number 4, in the Netherlands hit number 1. I'm just looking at Wikipedia. Like they were hitting top 10 albums in a lot of countries. So
Yeah,
it's like it was popular.
it's amazing to think, right? Because like, getting like you and I, we got into Prague, way past its heyday,
Yeah.
and it's amazing to think that at some point you could just turn on the radio and hear Yes or hear King Crimson.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
All right, my number 4 is Drama from 1980, which is the 10th album. I ranked it a bit higher than you did, and this is their first album to feature Trevor Horn on lead vocals. And like you said, he does a really good John Anderson impression. And then it doesn't have Rick Wakeman either, so it's got Jeff Downes on keyboards. He's pretty good as well. I think Rick Wakeman is like the legendary keyboard player of Yes, but Jeff Downes does a really good job. And even, yeah, it's just amazing how good this album manages to be without those two really key members of Yes. So even without John Anderson and Rick Wakeman, it's just really good. And it starts being even catchier. So I think Going for the One was a pretty catchy but proggy album. This one, I don't know whether to consider this like a pop album or a prog album with Drama. It really like, it's right in the middle. It's kind of a bit more proggy than pop, but it has this amazing balance between their 70s stuff and then where they're going with 90125 and Big Generator. You can kind of hear this really catchy stuff. My favorite song on here is Into the Lens, which is the opening track of side 2 of the album. I love the rhythm in the intro. The vocals are catchy. It's kind of like, I don't know about the lyrics. It's like, I am a camera.
Yeah.
But
That part
like,
kind of turned me off.
It's so catchy. I don't know. I have to love it. And the lead guitars on here are amazing. They use weird vocal effects on here though. So if you don't like the vocoder vocal effects, it can sound like they're using autotune. I don't think autotune existed at this time. So I could hear, I don't know if you said it about this one or about another one, about the overproduced vocals. But I could definitely hear what you're saying. But I think it was kind of cool that they like had this vocoder and they're like, all right, let's give it a go. And it sounds really, really neat. And Tempest Fugit is my second favorite. You mentioned that one as well. And it's got the reggae vibe, like the Police. We talked about how their influence is shining through. It's kind of like a Police song, but with like better riffs, faster lead guitars, fast keyboards. And they use vocoder on that again as well. So I think maybe that's what you're hearing on the vocal side that's like weird, because it's that effect.
It could be. I didn't realize that they used vocoder.
I believe that's what it is. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, that's neat. Maybe I'll have to re-listen to Into the Lens, because like I think when I heard it, as soon as I heard that I am a camera, I was like, okay, this is super cheesy.
Yeah,
um,
it's cheesy, but it's good when you get it. And like the synths are awesome, and I think it was really cool.
nice. Yeah, it's a good album.
All right, we're at the top three.
All right, top three. My number three is the Yes album. Not to be confused with their first album, which is just Yes. I thought that was like a really weird naming thing that
That is
they have.
weird.
They have an album called Yes and the Yes album. I think they were just kind of trying to like reinvent themselves,
Yeah.
because this was their first prog album. And they kind of wanted to be like, okay, this is our sound, this is who we are, this is the Yes album. But yeah, this one, it's got so many great classic songs on there. Yours is No Disgrace.
Yeah.
It's just like, I think this was one of the first Yes songs that I heard, and I just love how like they layer the different parts. I think this is one of Yes' biggest strengths. It kind of comes in with this bouncy guitar riff, that da 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 da,
Yeah.
and it's kind of nice on its own. But then there's these big, this organ comes in, the da 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 da, and then the bass comes in, and then they just kind of hold this chord, and they hold it for a long time, and the verse is just, there's no drums or bass or anything, they're just singing a cappella over this one chord. And it's this really cool 3-part harmony over this one chord. It's just like this, like it almost has like an angelic feeling to it. I think that's one of the best moments in the whole Yes discography for me, is just the verses of Yours is No Disgrace.
Oh, yeah.
And I love how they kind of play around with the themes. So after you hear the first verse, later in the song, there's like this jazzy moment where there's like a walking bass line, and I think it's even an upright bass that he's playing, and there's just like a jazzy repetition of the first verse. And then yeah, it's just, they keep bringing back these guitar riffs and these verses. It's a great song. There's Starship Trooper, which is really cool.
Nice.
I love how they're not just amazing like technical musicians, they also come up with these really cool chord progressions that aren't like your typical like 4 chords of pop. And I think in this song there's some of the prettiest chord changes, like in the part where it's like, speak to me of summer. There's some really interesting changes, and it just kind of weaves in and out of a bunch of different keys.
Yeah.
And then it goes into this huge build up at the end where it just, they're just kind of layering more and more stuff on top of this 3-chord sequence. Really cool. I've Seen All Good People. It's one of those songs that I didn't really get into right away, because when I first heard it, it just kind of has this like, this kind of like happy acoustic ballad feel in the beginning, with some pretty cheesy chess metaphors over it. But then in the second half, when it goes into that like Beatlesy section where they just keep like repeating like, I've seen all good people turn their heads each day,
I
that part
love
gets
that.
so good,
And
so
there's
good.
parts where it goes dark and they like bring it into like, it's kind of, they modulate, right? Like they're doing it all happy, and
Yeah,
then they bring it into like a minor key, and then they like, oh, it's so good.
yeah, they modulate down and then back up. It's neat, and it's funny because they're just repeating a single lyric, right? This,
Yes.
I've seen all good people turn their heads each day, so satisfied I'm on my way. But somehow it works, like it doesn't feel repetitive, it just feels like this
Yeah.
amazing
Because
groove
they
that I could.
modulate it, but it makes it easy. Like if they played in concert, people could sing along because they know the words, because it's just one line, but then they modulate it all over the place.
It's a great sing-along song. I'm pretty sure that we sang along with it when we saw them live.
Probably.
And then there's Perpetual Change, which has a really, really cool intro, that da 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 da.
Oh yeah.
And and then on top of that, there's like this cool, the bass part comes in, the da 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 da. And I feel like it's one of those songs where the rest of the song doesn't really live up to the intensity of the intro. Like it feels like it's setting you up for this huge thing. Um,
Yeah, I like the synth on that. That it goes like dun, 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 right. I think it's that song too.
yeah.
Oh, so good.
That part is neat, but I still feel like the intro, it belongs in a better song. And it's funny because I heard this cover that Spock's Beard did. It is kind of a mashup where they take the intro from Perpetual Change
Yeah.
and then they use it with South Side of the Sky. So it's kind of like two Yes songs in one. And I thought that actually worked really well, how they just like tacked on the intro from one song
Okay.
onto
I'm gonna
another.
have to listen to that. I don't think I've ever heard that.
It's really cool. They do a great job covering that one. So yeah, the Yes album, that's my number 3. It's a
Oh
great
yeah.
album.
My number 3 as well. Yes,
Awesome.
so, and my favorite song there is "I've Seen All Good People." I love that. It opens the second side of the album. Sometimes I also like to think about how these albums like worked on vinyl. So like there'd be a side, then you flip it over, and this would start the second side. And the first part is just this angelic and beautiful part. The second half comes in, and it has this like country rock and bluesy boogie with this like oh, great vocal harmonies. It's got like this rockabilly feel to it, like the guitar solo. They had this like that country influence and the slide guitar thing that we talked about before. But and I don't usually like country. I think the issue I have with country is like when they're like just boring, simple pop songs, and like the male vocals in country just always sound like burr, 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 burr. Like so something about like when a band like this, when like a proggy band does country, I'm like I could love this, like this style. This I love the sound of slide guitar and like some of the bluegrassy sounds of country. But if there was somebody who could do like musically interesting and like not have that annoying country vocal sound, that I would probably listen to more country, honestly.
Yeah. There's a few prog bands that have experimented with slide guitar. I know that a lot of early Floyd used a lot of slide guitar. Um,
Yeah, there's
yeah.
definitely some others. I don't remember all the parts, but I oh yeah, I think King Crimson does too.
Mhm.
Songs they do everything. So. I also really like the instrumental on this album called Clap, which I think is one of the best like solo guitar songs I've heard. It's also got this bluegrass country vibe, but it's like Steve Howe just like shredding on the acoustic guitar. And I think he played it live when we saw him, and it's just madness.
I think the album version is a live version, actually. You can hear the audience and you can
Oh
hear
yeah.
at the end, he's like, oh, thank you. And yeah, he's an incredible guitarist, man. Like he can, it's cool because you don't often get to see like the acoustic side of him, but it's just solo guitar and it's crazy how much he's doing on there.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. Like I'd be curious. I'm like, oh, I'd love to maybe learn that, but I think it's a little bit too crazy for me.
It's going to make you feel very sad about your guitar skills. I
Yeah,
think I looked it up at some point and yeah, it was difficult.
yeah.
I'm confused as to why it's called the clap, because like if it was called just clap, I understand, but when I hear clap with a the in front of it,
It's like the
you know,
disease.
yeah, I think of STDs. And there's
Is
no,
there a the, or is it just called? I think
it's
it might just be called clap.
oh really? I thought it was the clap.
No, I think it's just called clap.
Oh, okay, my mistake.
But your brain put that in front of it.
All right, all right.
No, but I could definitely see that association with STDs.
Yeah, because there's no clapping in the song, right? Like, there aren't any sections. I guess you could clap along to it, right? It's
Yeah,
got
I
like this,
think might be some. I don't
it's
know.
like a bouncy ragtime feel to it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know why it's called that, but there's no lyrics, so they just had to call it something. And yeah, I think you're right. It's like a live version of the album, so maybe they called it clap because they hear people clapping in it.
It's possible. It's always hard to name instrumental songs because,
Yeah,
in naming any other song, you just take a lyric from the chorus. There's your name. But
yeah.
instrumentals, yeah. I'm sure you have the same problem with Death by Unicorn.
Yeah, well, actually, I don't because I just because usually with Death by Unicorn music, it is instrumental mostly, but I am usually like in taking inspiration from a specific band for each track. That's kind of
Ah, okay.
my MO for Death by Unicorn. So then I just like make a pun on their name
Yeah,
because
I noticed
I'm
that.
listening to a band, I'm listening to a specific band. I'm like, I'm gonna write a song that's like in the style of this band, and then I just make a pun on their name, and that's how I name the song. So it's it's been pretty easy to name the songs that way. But if I didn't have that idea, then I don't know how I would name them.
Yeah, that's a good way to go. Just kind of mangle up a band's name to
Yeah,
kind of pay homage to them.
yeah.
Neat. Um, I think that our number twos are probably going to be the same, just based on
Yeah.
elimination. My number two is Fragile. Um, it's a great album. It's got a lot of the classic Yes songs. This is the one that came out after the Yes album.
Mhm.
And it's kind of an interesting format too, because it's got, I think, four full band songs. And then there's four songs which are kind of like to show off an individual band member.
Yeah, I love
Um,
that.
so uh, personally, I'm not such a huge fan of the individual band member songs because
Yeah.
I feel like this is definitely one of those bands where even though all the members are incredible musicians, they're one of those bands where the whole is more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
yeah, but it is kind of cool to hear like all the different
Yeah.
ingredients that go into the stew.
I think if
And
they always did it like that, it would kind of be weird and you wouldn't get the classic guest. But I actually think it's really great for this. I think it's specifically this album, and it's like almost like it's part of the concept where they
mhm.
like have a couple band songs and then they're like, all right, now let's give everybody their moment to shine. And it seems like everybody was genuinely into it, and it feels like honest and innovative still. So I really like it.
Yeah, it's neat. And I think it was, especially in the 70s, it was more worthwhile because nowadays, if you want to hear what John Petrucci sounds like alone, or if you want to hear what,
Watch it
Jordan
on
Rudess
YouTube.
sounds like alone, yeah, just go on YouTube and find them shredding and then feel bad about yourself.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
in the 70s, there was no YouTube. So this was really the only venue that you could hear
Yeah.
the individual members. But yeah, from the individual tracks, there's Cans and Brahms,
Yeah.
which is I guess Rick Wakeman playing Brahms, and I don't know, I just found it to be kind of pretentious organ
Yeah, that'd be the
wankery.
one. If I was gonna take off any, I'd take off that one because it's really like it's not a composition, it's an arrangement, right? So
Yeah,
it's like an
yeah,
arrangement of classical music, which is cool, but uh I would have preferred it if Rick Wakeman actually composed something because I know he can.
oh yeah,
He should have done
he
that for his solo song instead of like just taking some classical stuff and making a medley.
yeah, he definitely can compose. He's had some great solo albums. The the Seven Wives of King Henry VIII was a really
Oh,
cool
yeah,
one.
I have to hear that. I haven't listened to any Rick Wakeman solo, but I've been hearing that it's good, so I have to go listen.
Yeah, yeah, I'd give it a try. A lot of it is very, yes, adjacent. Yeah, the others individual tracks. We have Heaven, which is the showcase track for John Anderson.
Mhm.
For me, that one doesn't really do much either. I kind of feel like he's just kind of like chanting a mantra over and over again. Um,
I think the
and
vocals are really catchy there, and the harmonies are good though. But I agree, it's hard. It's short too, so it's hard to consider it like one of their best or anything.
yeah, I do like the other individual tracks. The Fish is pretty cool. It's kind of that's the showcase for Chris Squire, the bassist, and it's one of those songs that when you listen to it, it's hard to even believe how much of it is bass, because it's kind of like a looper jam. Like he kind of lays on more and more layers of bass until you have this huge loop going,
Mhm.
and it just kind of shows off his tonal variety because a lot of the things on there, they don't sound like bass, but they are.
Right.
And of course, there's Steve Howe's Mood for a Day, which I think is probably my favorite of the individual showcase tracks. It's just this really pretty solo acoustic finger style thing.
Right.
Um, Yeah, but for me, the best part of the album is the combined tracks.
Yeah.
Roundabout is classic Yes. That's one of the few Yes songs that you'll actually hear on like classic rock radio.
Yep.
South Side of the Sky, I really love because it kind of shows like a bit of a moodier, darker side of Yes, um,
Mhm.
which you don't often get to see. It just has this big epic feel. Um, Long Distance Runaround is terrific, and they also do that thing where they kind of like bring in layers one after another, which I really love. Like it comes in with this really like kind of chipper kind of like
Oh yeah. That kind of sounds like Gentle Giant to me too.
it does. And when you first hear that guitar riff, you're like, it's just like this really happy bouncy riff. But then the bass comes in, and it's just this like distorted kind of chugling bass line underneath it, and it just totally changes the feel of that riff. It puts it in a new context. Um, so I really love that. Heart of the Sunrise, another classic. Uh, Frantic bass lines all over the place, great guitar intros. Um, yeah, I can't even pick a favorite off of this one. I think it's probably got to be a tie between South Side of the Sky and Heart of the Sunrise, but all of them are so good.
Okay. My number two is actually not that. It's going to be Close to the Edge.
Oh, okay.
This album, which, has the amazing 19-minute epic song Close to the Edge. And then I think, so that's side one of the vinyl. And then side two has the two songs, and You and I, Siberian Get True. So I kind of just think of it as those three songs. I know there's like the bonus tracks with America and like the Total Mass Retained, which is a single version of like a piece of Close to the Edge and stuff like that. But if you think of it as just those three songs, I feel like it's pretty much a perfect album. Like their top two albums are so good um, that I wouldn't want to change anything about it. I know maybe a Close to the Edge could be a little shorter. There's a little bit of like weird noodly bits, but I think it's really great. That's my favorite song on here, Close to the Edge. Um, but I like all of them. And You and I is beautiful, great angelic, clean guitar parts, beautiful synth stuff, vocal melodies. Siberian Katru is also really awesome. It's hard to like. That's like my third favorite song on this album, but like if it was on most other Yes albums, it would be like my favorite. It's because every song here's a masterpiece. It's got the country-ish kind of guitar part, great bass lines.
What is a cut true exactly?
I don't know actually. What does that mean? Google it.
Is it because I always thought it was Siberian Kotru. I don't know what's the correct way to pronounce
Katru
it.
or Katru? What is it? What does Katru mean? I'm looking now on definitions. Oh, I don't even think it's a word.
They just invented a word for the song title.
Although if I Google Katru, like there things come up. Maybe it's I think it might be another language. I think it might be a word in another language, or maybe it's like a name. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know
Oh
what it
wait,
is, but it's cool.
wait. According to an interview with Yes vocalist John Anderson, Katru means "as you wish" in the Yemeni dialect of Arabic.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, that's interesting.
Not sure what that has to do with Siberia, but who knows what's going on in John Anderson's head.
It's a Siberian Arabic phrase.
This is my favorite Siberian Arabic song.
All right. Well, I'm totally forget which one is your number one now. I've been trying to like keep track. So over to you for your number one.
Well, it's I know that this is probably not a very popular opinion, but my number one is Going for the One.
Oh yeah, I like that a lot. I think I can see why it would be your favorite. I think I ranked it like 7, but yeah, great.
So it's got some pretty unique parts. One interesting thing is that instead of using like a regular 70s like Hammond electric organ, he actually plays a church organ on this one.
Oh yeah.
And you can really hear it. You can hear that big like sound with all the pipes and everything.
Mhm.
and it gives it a really kind of idiosyncratic sound. And it's also the album, it's pretty sloppy, but like kind of in a good way. Like it sounds very organic.
Yeah.
um it sounds like parts of it are a bit more jammy and less composed than some, like, the Yes album, where all the songs are very tight. You could tell that they've worked out all the parts in advance.
Yeah.
um yeah, you mentioned the title track. I absolutely love it. It starts off with slide guitar, it goes into kind of like bluesy rock and roll. um and it's like this great energetic song. I think that's the kind of song that, yeah, even if you're not into prog, anyone can enjoy it.
Yeah.
I love Parallels. It's got this awesome organ and bass intro, and it just has a very triumphant vibe. Like I just get pumped every time I listen to it. um there's Wondrous Stories, which is like this pretty medieval ballad, and it works really well with John Anderson's voice, because he sounds like a troubadour, kind of singing you a pretty ballad about wondrous stories.
Yeah.
It's a very wholesome kind of song. I could almost see it like being like a children's song in a way. But I think that for me, the reason why this album is number one is Awaken, which I think is just like an absolute masterpiece.
Oh yeah.
Um,
That's the Prague one at the end.
Yes, it's not a typical Yes sound. It's a lot darker than most of their songs, um, and yeah, it just kind of it starts off with this like really lightning fast piano riff, and it goes into this like moody kind of Eastern sounding groove, um, and there's some of Steve Howe's best guitar here, like just noodling around all the riffs. Um, yeah, it's just a terrific song, and it was also probably one of the highlights of the show that we went to for me, just hearing them play that live. Absolutely amazing.
Nice. All right.
What's your number one?
So my number one is Fragile, their fourth album. Very beautiful. And I think this is, yes, if someone was asking me to define progressive rock, I would hand them Close to the Edge and Fragile. But yes, I think are very defining albums. My favorite song on here is Roundabout, which is the opening track. It might be a bit of a lame pick because I know it's one of their most popular songs, but I do think it's really great. I love the bass line, the guitar parts, keys, vocals, drums, everything. I like, the guitar part that opens up with the use of harmonics, and then when that bass groove hits, it's just amazing. Like, oh, so good. Yeah, everything on this album is great. I agree with you. The band songs are better than the individual songs, but I kind of like the format because I think there's enough, you get enough full band songs here and you get the individual members to shine. So my second favorite song is, I think, also a full band song, Heart of the Sunrise. Another amazing bass line, great vocals. Yeah, really, really catchy stuff. And it ends, I like how it ends with the We Have Heaven theme again. So they have like that recurring theme throughout the album.
Which is that? Which theme is the We Have Heaven theme?
I think it ends with the dun 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 with like
Oh, right, 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 right.
over it. And they cram that part from We Have Heaven into this like more epic full band proggy song, which is kind of cool. And So Side of the Sky is awesome. Long Distance Runaround, I think, is the other full band song. Really, really awesome stuff. And then of the individual stuff, my favorite might actually be We Have Heaven, the John Anderson one. It's very short, but I love the vocal harmonies and like the counterpoint going on in here. It's short and it's to the point, but it's like engaging the whole time. I also really like Mood for a Day, the solo guitar piece. The Fish is great. That's the Chris Squire one. I think the 5% for Nothing must be the drummers.
Yeah, yeah, that's Bill Bruford's. I think that one is supposed to be kind of a joke.
It's short, like it's only 35 seconds long, and it just sounds like they're glitching out, like the bass.
Yeah. So the story behind that one is that I think the record company took a cut of their profits. I
Uh,
think they took 5% off of the last album, and Bill Bruford was really unhappy about it because he, I don't know, I think he felt that they deserved less or something. So he wrote this one song called 5% for Nothing, just as kind of a fuck you to the record company.
oh,
um,
like that
and
there.
but it's, I don't know, it's kind of, it seems kind of immature to actually put that on the album, because you're not screwing over the record company, right? You're kind of screwing over the people buying the album. But it is a very short
Only
song.
35 seconds. I thought it was maybe more of like, hey, well, everyone else gets their like solo song with a chance to shine. Like, why don't I get something? And since he's more of the drummer, maybe he doesn't like compose full like musical pieces with like melody and harmony. And he's just like, let's just do a glitchy like drum thing. And then you guys can throw some like glitchy bass keys and just everyone glitch out on here.
Yeah. I feel like it took about 35 seconds to compose that song.
They might have honestly just done random shit. They're like, hey, I'm gonna hit record and like everyone do random stuff.
Yeah. It's only 35 seconds, but it's still, like
Well, yeah.
in that era, the amount of music you could squeeze onto a vinyl was very limited. And who knows, maybe if we didn't have this, we'd have 35 more seconds of South Side of the Sky, which I would
Maybe.
definitely
Yeah.
prefer.
Oh yeah. If I was gonna take anything off here, it would honestly be the Cans and Brahms by Wakeman, because it's just arrangement of classical music, and then 5% for Nothing. But even those, I feel like they have their place. It's like everyone gets their chance to do their thing. And then there's still the 4 amazing full band songs
Mhm.
fall back on. Even if it was just those songs and it was like an EP, it would just be so perfect. But then everybody getting their chance to shine, I think, is kind of nice. Even though those 2 are maybe not the best. They're so short that like with 35 seconds for this 5% for Nothing and a minute 34 for Cans of Brahms, it's like a nice brief pause and like relaxing for a moment before you jump into the next thing, the next song. So it's almost like an interlude or like some elevator music between like these other epic things. So I'm kind of okay with it. It flows to me as an album. Like I don't want to listen to it from start to end, and everything just makes sense.
It does flow, but I still find myself skipping over the individual tracks most of the time to get to
Oh
the
yeah.
full band songs.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Cool. Well, thanks for ranking Yes with me. We got to the end.
It was my pleasure. Yeah, it was great talking to you about this awesome band.
All right. Yeah, I'll make a playlist with our favorite songs from each album whenever we mention them. If you didn't mention one, I'll just stick my 2 favorites the album
Sure.
on, and hope some people check that out and get into Yes. Or maybe, I'm sure most people have at least heard something from Yes, but if they haven't done a deep dive on their discography, maybe this will inspire people to do that.
When you make the playlist, you should also put on the Spock's Beard cover of South Side of the Sky that mashes in the intro from Perpetual Change.
Yeah, maybe I'll put that at the very end as well of that playlist. Sounds like a good idea. All right, until next time, peace out.